So, our program this morning is especially relevant to our human world today, as we find ourselves again wrestling with the fundamental issues of ethnic and racial and religious difference, and the strengths and weaknesses of governmental structures that can protect us from the abuses of differing opinion and position. Our presentation today looks back into the darker shadows of our American story and a moment in time when the American constitutional rights somewhat failed in the swirling fear of sudden world war and the existing and embedded racial discrimination that led to the imprisonment of all people of Japanese ancestry, men, women, and children, of which about 2/3 were American citizens. Jim Tanimoto is 100. Jim Tanimoto is 101 years old today. That is a fabulous story. Today is actually not his birthday, but now at this point in time. So he was 19. He was 19 when his entire family was swept up and away from their own family house and ranch there, just a little out Gridley, where they had been since about 1905. So Jim, today I want to introduce him, have him come up and tell us his story. And then following Jim's presentation, we will take just a 5 to 10 minute break. And then we're going to move toward showing a video that was made by Professor and Dr. Jesse Bizarre of the Anthropology Department at Chico State. And he will introduce the video that he made about this very story titled Mr. Tanimoto's Journey. So, without further ado,
I'm back here.
There he is.
Get this out of your way and maybe try to turn this down just a touch. Come on, maybe. Yeah, we'll just do it down. No, that's yours.
Okay.
There you go. That looks good.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank David and Betty Noble for giving me the opportunity to tell you my story, what happened 82 years ago. I am 101-year-old American citizen of Japanese ancestry. I'm still driving. My driver's license will expire in 2025. I still feel comfortable behind the wheel, so I am going to try to renew my driver's license in next year. Thank you, David and Betty Noble, for giving me the opportunity to tell you my story. My surgeon told me I am the only 100-year-old patient to have a hip replacement surgery. So I have made new friends recuperating at the Prestige in Marysville Assisted Living How many of you have any knowledge of what happened to people of Japanese ancestry during World War II? Thank you. America is a country of immigrants who came here from all parts of the world except for the Native Americans, Indians. They were the only true American. They lived off the land and took only what was needed. When the white immigrants needed more land, they killed these Native Americans and took their land. And they killed the bison, the buffaloes, for just their skins, almost hunting these animals to extinction. Where did the Native Americans end up? In a reservation, the first American concentration camp. The Japanese American followed and became the victim of the second American concentration camp. Remember, it's not what you did, but what your ancestry did. February 19th, 1942, 82 years ago, our President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed the Executive Order 9066, which put 120,000 people of Japanese ancestry behind the barbed wire and the guard towers. As 70% were American citizens, all without due process of the law. What would you do if your family were forced into these prisons? February 19th, 2024, our Governor Newsom, and our California legislatures in Sacramento declared every February 19th to be called the Day of Remembrance. Earlier, February 19th, 2022, our President Joe Biden made a presidential proclamation making every February 19th a national day of remembrance. Why is this day, February 19th, important to the people of Japanese ancestry? This day, we became prisoners of war without due process. But before I get into my story, I would like to give you something to think about. What is this document, the United States Constitution, and what is it for? Do you believe in the United States Constitution? Do you believe that the Constitution was meant for all the people? Do you believe that the United States Constitution is in effect at all times? Do you believe your own United States government can discriminate against its own citizen because of color, race, religion, or ancestry? Do you believe that the Japanese American under the United States Constitution were treated equally as other American citizens during World War II? My name is Jim Tanimoto. I am a loyal American citizen of Japanese ancestry. This is my true story of what my own government did to its own citizens just because we look like the enemy. Just the Japanese, not the Germans or the Italians. This is not a Japanese story. This is an American story. My story is titled Changing Dreams. From July 9th, 1942 to February 26, 1944, I was a prisoner of war by my own government in 3 different places. Tule Lake War Relocation Authority Camp, the Klamath Falls County Jail, and at the Civilian Conservation Camp. My name is Jim Tanimoto, also known as 27175. This was my prisoner number. I was born June 3rd, 1923 in Marysville, California. I am 101-year-old American citizen. I went to school in Gridley, California, and finished high school in 1941. I registered with the Selective Service when I turned 18. Soon, I was classified 1A, ready to be drafted to the military, when our President, Franklin D. Roosevelt, signed the Executive Order 9066. I became 4C, which stands for enemy alien. I am not the enemy. I am an American citizen. Also, I am not an alien because I was born in America. I told my draft board I wanted to enlist. They told me I could not enlist because I was an enemy alien. I tried to argue. They told me to leave. What would you do if your own government took away your constitutional right, like you can't have guns, cameras, radios, flashlights, etc.? You have a boundary that you are not allowed to cross. This was Highway 99 in my case. You have a curfew, meaning that you had to be home at a certain time and not to leave before a certain hour. You have travel restrictions. You can't travel beyond 5 miles without a pass or a permit. You can't volunteer for the military service because your draft board has classified you 4C, enemy alien. You are presumed guilty without due process and were sent to prison without any charges, trial, or hearing. Worst of all, you and your family were forced to leave your home and business without being charged and put into what was called the American concentration camp. Would you, as an American citizen, abide by these rules? Let's see. Abide by these rules, or would you say, I am an American citizen, and you can't do this to me because of our Constitution. Well, this is what the Japanese American had when the Executive Order 9066 was signed by the President, FDR. This changed everything for the Japanese American. Even if you had as little as 1/16 of Japanese blood in your body, all the people of Japanese ancestry were rounded up and put into what was called the American concentration camp. If you lived in parts of Arizona, all of California, parts of Oregon, Washington, and Alaska, you were forced behind the barbed wire fence and the guard towers, a prisoner. The Japanese, who lived close to the ocean, were given just days and forced to leave their homes and businesses and put into what was called the assembly center. They used labor camp, fairground, horse stables at the racetrack. They moved the horses out, and the Japanese families were moved in. They were issued body bags and were told to stuff straw into them and use it to sleep on. How would you feel if this happened to your family, your husband, your wife, your children, your mother, your father, your sister, your brother, and your grandparents were treated like this? There were long lines, and we were fed military-style food until the Japanese prisoners took over the job. The toilet and shower facilities had no privacy. They were all open without any partition. When we were forced to move, we were not allowed to take our pets, like cats and dogs. Many of man's best friends were killed when there was no one to take care of them. Some storage places would not store anything belonging to the Japanese. Some raised their rates. Some lost track of the stored goods. Many people tried to sell some of the items from their home. They were offered just pennies, like $5 for a $500 fine china set. These buyers knew that we would have to sell or leave them behind when we were forced out of our home. Refrigerators, washers were offered $5 each. Cars were sold for $100, even if it was new. When we were forced to leave our home, we had no charges against us. We did not break any laws. We were loyal American citizens who lost our civil rights without charges, hearing, or trial. When the Japanese were moved from the assembly center to a more permanent camp, we had more barbed wire fence and many more guard towers that would many more guard towers with powerful searchlights that they would turn on when it got dark. July 9, 1942, when we were forced to leave our home, we got on the train at the Greeley Southern Pacific Railroad Depot. You can only take what you could carry. When the train started to move, we were ordered to pull the window shades down. We didn't know where we were going. Next morning, we got off the train at a place called Tule Lake War Relocation Authority Camp, and we were assigned to Block 42. The camp is just a few miles south of the Oregon border. Our population in camp was over 18,000. We were probably the largest population in California, north of Sacramento, in 1942. My address was Block 4204A. Our room was 16 feet by 20 feet. The rooms were not finished. We had no sheetrock on the ceiling or walls. Most families hung bed sheets or blankets for more privacy. We had a heating stove in the center of the room, bunk beds with mattresses, a single light bulb hanging from the rafters. In our room, we had 4 brothers. Some families had as many as 6 or 7 people assigned to their room. We ate our meals at a place called Mess Hall. We had communal showers and toilets without stalls. The showers were just shower heads sticking out of the wall. When we ate, the children had their meals with their friends, so the family unit just vanished. There were no bread earners. Everything came from the government. So the children did what most children would do. They formed gangs. The camp was like any other city. We had a police force, a fire department, post office, hospitals, banks, churches, schools, etc. For recreation, we played baseball, softball, volleyball, basketball, ping pong. The camp had its own farm. We grew most of our own vegetables, weather permitting. There were also a chicken and hog farm. Our food bill was 43 cents a day for 3 meals. If you worked, you were paid $12 a month for unskilled labor, $19 a month for skilled labor, such as doctors, lawyers, supervisors. There were 10 camps. The camps were located mostly in the desert, where no one would want to live. Just sand, sagebrush, rattlesnake, scorpions, and mosquitoes. the temperature during the winter would drop below zero. It was very cold with no insulation in the buildings. The summers were very hot and dry. Many days over 100 degrees. The floors in the barracks would dry out and leave large cracks between the floorboard, and you could see the ground. We had whirlwinds. When one passed your room, you had dust and dirt on everything. 1943, the people behind the barbed wire fence and the armed guard tower were ordered to fill out the so-called loyalty form. We were threatened with a $10,000 fine and 20 years in jail if we did not cooperate by our camp administrator, the War Department, and the FBI. Informed the camp administrator that the so-called loyalty form was neither a violation of the Selective Service Act or the Espionage Act, and did not carry a $10,000 fine and 20 years in jail. But this information was not made public until years later. There were two questions, number 27 and number 28. Question 27 had to do with joining the military to defend the Constitution in America whenever ordered. Question 28 had to do with cutting all ties with Japan and the Emperor. I have no ties with Japan and the Emperor. So, how was I to answer this question? If your answer was yes, you are admitting you have ties with Japan and the Emperor. If your answer was no, you was classified disloyal. A yes, yes answer with an explanation, you were classified disloyal. We had many questions. Why were we singled out and forced into these concentration camps? Why do I have to prove my loyalty to America when no other groups had to prove themselves? Why was my constitutional rights taken away? Why was I not charged with any kind of crime? Why didn't I have a court trial or a hearing? Why am I here? These questions were never answered. So I refused to fill out this form. There were 36 young men in Block 42 who refused to fill out this form. For this, we were put in the county jail. Half of us went to Klamath Falls, Oregon. The other half went to Alturas, California County Jail. This was done to intimidate the other block to not follow Block 42's example. But this action had the opposite effect. More blocks followed by showing more resistance to this form. I refused to cooperate because we were not treated citizens. I think my government was wrong in putting American citizens without charges or trial in these concentration camps. We were called troublemakers. I am not a troublemaker. The real troublemaker was my own government. When we were moved from the county jail to a more permanent camp, when we were moved to a vacant civilian conservation camp, we were told that this was our new home. So we cleaned out the mess hall and one of the barracks. We were told not to run away because our guards were not here yet. After the guards arrived, everything changed. To go to the latrine, we needed a guard to escort us. If you took too long, the guard would shout, "Get your ass out of there." One night, we were awakened by a soldier shouting, "Get your ass out of bed and line up outside." When we went outside, it was dark. We could hear something, but we couldn't make it out. When they turned on the bright lights, the noise was the soldiers loading their weapons. There were about 15 soldiers, 7 or 8 on one side, a machine gun, and another 7 or 8 soldiers on the other side. A thought went through my mind. We were standing in front of a firing squad. And then a soldier came forward and said, "Nobody is going to escape." He repeated this and then told us, "Go back to bed." Next morning, they started to interview us. When my name was called, they asked if I would fill out the same papers. I told them no. My job at the civilian conservation camp was to remove the garbage from the mess hall and take it to a dump several hundred yards away. I asked our escort guard if he knew any Japanese people. He told me he was from San Francisco and his best friend was Japanese. He also told me he was sorry for how we were treated a United States citizen in the United States. Being a soldier, there wasn't anything that he could do. There were 4 people who challenged the internment order in the United States Supreme Court. 3 were found guilty by the Supreme Court. 1 person won her case. Her name was Mitsue Endo. She argued that it was not within government power to hold American citizens without due process. Hence, the entire internment program was a manifestation of racism. During the 1980s, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals and Congress agreed that the wartime removal had not been constitutional. The Ninth Circuit Court overturned the wartime conviction of Gordon Hirabayashi, Fred Korimatsu, Minoru Yasui. They were awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest award that the president could offer to his citizen. Mitsue Endo also received the award. There were 9 former presidents who agreed that the forced evacuation of Japanese Americans was a mistake. 48 years after the signing of the Executive Order 9066 in 1990, we received an apology letter from then President George W. Bush and $20,000 restitution for our internment. Most people thought the apology letter was more important than the money. My $20,000 went to my granddaughter for a college education. The apology letter reads like this: a monetary sum and words alone cannot restore the lost years or erase the painful memories. Neither can they fully convey our nation's resolve to rectify injustice and uphold the rights of individuals. We can never fully right the wrongs of the past, but we can take a clear stand for justice and recognize how serious injustices were done to the Japanese American during World War II. In enacting a law calling for restitution and offering sincere apology, your fellow Americans have, in a very real sense, renewed their traditional commitments to the ideals of freedom, equality, and justice. You and your family have our best wishes for the future. Signed, sincerely, George W. Bush, President of the United States, October 1990. When the United States government asked the Japanese American prisoners to volunteer from behind the barbed wire fence, many prisoners did. With many draftees, like my own brother Jack, who volunteered to the Military Intelligence Service. He served in the Pacific and was awarded a Silver Star for above and beyond the call of duty. They were joined by a group of soldiers from the Hawaiian Islands to form their own segregated unit called the 442 Regimental Combat Team. This unit became the most highly decorated unit in the history of the United States military, even when their own families were still held prisoners behind the barbed wire fence. February 26, 1944, when I was released from the American concentration camp and driven home by the vice president of Tully Lake High School, I asked if there was any restriction on what I could do or not do. He told me I was a free man and I could do whatever I wanted. In my hometown, we had discrimination from the people on the street. The merchants that we did business with before the war. But the one I just can't forgive or forget is my school teacher, who I knew very well. When I greeted him, I put out my hand and told him I was home again, and it was nice to see him. He told me I was on the wrong side, and he turned his back to me and he walked away. This still remains in my mind. I have great respect for the teachers who tried to educate us. In June 1945, Tule Lake, where I met and married a girl from Sebastopol, California, Alice Takesta. We were together for 53 years. After we came home, we started to farm again, and the discrimination slowly disappeared. 1966, we heard about the Chinese gooseberry, later called kiwi fruit. The Tanimoto family had a lot to do with introducing this fruit to America. Today, kiwi is just another fruit like apples and oranges. July 9th, 1942, the day that we were forced to leave, our clean peach crop was almost ready to begin harvest in 5 or 6 days. Our neighbors assured us that they would try to harvest the crop. There was discrimination for those who helped the Japanese. All 1,000 tons of clean peaches went on the ground. These neighbors were probably called Jap lovers. After we all returned, we started to farm our orchard again. We needed cars and pickup. My oldest brother started looking for these vehicles. There was none to be found locally, so he went to Sacramento and he found something that the family could use and bought it. On the way home, he had an accident with another car. The driver of the other car was a Jap hater. He said he was going to make an example of this accident, and he would try to keep out any Jap from returning to California. The First Lady, Eleanor Roosevelt, heard about this incident and wrote a personal letter to him. If he was going to pursue what he said, he would have to deal with her. So he dropped the case. Who would want to fight the First Lady? It's ironic. The president put us in these concentration camps, and his wife, the First Lady, would defend us. If you were still going to school, each morning you stood by the flag in the shadow of the armed guard tower, behind the barbed wire fence, you started with, "I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America." And you ended with liberty and justice for all. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my story. Okay, let's start from over here. Okay.
Jim, I'm your neighbor,
Yes,
Linda, and I'm Melise.
I'm Melise.
So, when you received your $20,000 apology, if you had not survived, but you had been sequestered, what happened to that person's share?
So the only person that received the $20,000 had to be alive. Those that passed away, they didn't receive anything. Okay.
Were there camps in other states besides California?
Yes, there were 10 camps. 2 of them was in California, Utah, Nevada, no, Utah, Colorado, Arizona.
Alaska.
There were 10 of them. And the furthest one away was in Arkansas. Yes.
Where are you in that picture?
I'm the bottom row, the second from the second person on the left. I'm on.
Right. Right there.
Yeah. That was 82 years ago. Okay.
When you were forced to leave your home, what happened to all your possessions?
Fortunately for us, we had an old friend, and they were looking for a place to stay at that time. So we asked them to stay in our house. So we had this old friend that stayed in our house. My father had just retired, and he started making boxes, wooden boxes, to store things in. So in one of the rooms of that house, he put all the boxes together and put our possession in these boxes and stored them in one room. And these people stayed in the house. So we didn't lose anything. Some people were less fortunate. They had somebody to look after their property, and they never did. And they stole things, sold things, but everything was gone when they came back. They came back. They were one of the first homeless people that we have today. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So Jim, was your farm, was it intact when you returned to Gridley, and were you able to continue farming on your property?
Yes. We were more fortunate than most people because of what my father did when he was raising his family. He says, if you can't afford it, don't buy it. But our real estate, our orchard, it was ours. We had already paid for it. So the only thing that we had to do was to pay the taxes. And so
So the bank would have taken it back if you had a mortgage on it?
yes,
Yeah.
it was all ours. Yes.
Thank you for sharing your story with us. My question is, what kept you going day to day when you were in the camp?
You have to come up.
Thank you for sharing your story with us. What kept you going day to day in the camp?
Well, you know, when this war started, we had nothing to do with Japan. Japan was one country, America was another country, and I'm American. So, whatever my government wanted to do, I was in favor of my government. And when they told us that we were going to be evacuated to go to the internment camp, my father says, if I was in Japan, of course now, the first generation Japanese couldn't become a citizen. Even if they were here 20 years, we had laws saying that Asians can't become American citizens. My father told us, if he was in Japan and the head man told him, move, we would move. Now he says, you are American and your head man, the president, wants you to move to this camp. You should move. You should follow what the president wants. Well, we're a second generation called Nisei. We went to school. Our Constitution says we have certain rights. Even if the president wants you to move, we don't have to move. So anyway, my father says, you have to do what your president, what your number one man wants you to do to be a good American citizen. Well, we had nobody to talk to. When we was outside, we tried to talk to the city council. They wouldn't listen to us. We talked to the Butte County supervisor. They wouldn't listen to us. We tried to talk to the state legislature. They wouldn't listen to us. We try to get attention from the governor. He wouldn't listen to us. In Washington, our representatives wouldn't listen to us. And the president himself wouldn't listen to us. So we ended up in these concentration camps. Nobody would listen to us. So what do? My father says, you have to follow what your president wants you to do. We had nobody to listen to us, so we went to concentration camp. Okay. Done. Yes?
Do you know how many businesses in San Francisco were shut down when the Japanese were all forced to leave? Because a lot of those were Japanese owned, like in Japantown, Chinatown.
Well, San Francisco was one of the places closest to the ocean. In 10, 15 days, they were out of San Francisco in what they call the Assembly Center. So what do you do in the 2 weeks? Your government now wants you to move. They want you to move to Assembly Center. If you have a business, you have a house, you got an automobile, you got real estate, you got furniture and stuff in the house, in 2 weeks, but how can you move those things and store them? If you don't store them, you leave them there. And if you want to sell them, buyers come and say, I'll give you $5 for this, or $4 for that. In this one case that I know, it happened to be a fine china set. This buyer came up to her and says, I want to buy your fine china set. I'll give you $5 for something that was worth over $500. And she just stood there, unbelievable. And she looked at the guy, and she picked up her first dish and she slammed it on the ground and broke it. And she picked up another one, repeated it. She kept on doing this, and the guy said, "Stop, stop. I'll give you more money. I'll give you $6. So what do? Storage places, some of them wouldn't store anything that belonged to the Japanese. Some raised their rates. Some sold the stored goods and says, we don't know where it went. So, if you can't store it, you can't leave it in your house. Your house is vacant. Somebody comes along and cleans out the house. You lose it. If you have an automobile and you says, guy comes and says, I'll give you $50 for your automobile. It might be worth several thousand, or it might even be brand new, but nobody wants to. They know that you're going to have to move in a couple of days, so you take what you can get or you destroy it. And I know a lot of friends that destroyed everything that they had because they couldn't store it. And they didn't want to leave it there for some of these people that was going to, you know, offer you $5. And dryers, refrigerators, the same thing. Everything you had was worth $100, $200. It was only worth $1 or $2 for these people, these buyers. Okay.
Why don't we take that short break? There's still food and drink back there, and then we'll step toward seeing this about a 30-minute video called Mr. Tanimoto's Journey. It's about Jim and his story. It's very good. Professor Dr. Jesse Dezard will just give us a short introduction to that, and then we'll show it on the big screen. This has been a powerful presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.